The day I walked back into my parents' house, I was wearing a $3,000 coat. My mother looked at me like I was still the teenage girl she'd thrown out in the rain with a garbage bag full of clothes. My father was at the head of the table, same chair, same smug look, like 10 years hadn't passed. My brother Tyler was there too, sitting pretty, living in the bedroom that used to be mine, driving the car my grandmother left me in her will. Nobody knew what I'd spent the last 4 years building. Nobody knew what was sitting in my bag. And nobody knew that by the time dessert hit the table, every single one of them was going to lose something they couldn't get back. I didn't say a word when I walked in. I just smiled. Because the thing about people who throw you away, they never expect you to come back holding the receipt. If you've ever been counted out by the people who were supposed to love you most, stay with me. Because this story is for every person who was told they were nothing and decided to make that the biggest mistake someone ever made. Drop a heart in the comments if you're ready to watch this unfold. Subscribe channel, like video, and don't go anywhere. Because the best part? They never saw it coming. I want you to close your eyes for a second and imagine being 18 years old. No car, no savings, no college acceptance letter, just a black garbage bag with some jeans, a few shirts, and a broken phone charger, sitting on a wet sidewalk in November while rain soaks through your only hoodie. Now imagine the front door behind you has just been slammed shut by your own mother. And through the window, you can see your brother Tyler, 16 years old, golden child, apple of every eye in that house, watching you from the living room with a bag of chips in his hand. Not sad, not scared for you. Eating chips. That was the night my family threw me out, and I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't on drugs. I hadn't been arrested. I hadn't disrespected anyone or broken any rules that a normal teenager wouldn't break. What I had done, the unforgivable apparently, was get a job at a local diner without asking my father's permission first. I was trying to save money for community college. That was it. That was my crime. My father, Raymond, was the kind of man who needed to control every molecule of air in a room. He didn't see a daughter trying to build her future. He saw a girl who had moved without his permission. And in his house, his kingdom, that was an act of treason. My mother, Diane, was the kind of woman who had spent so long living inside my father's rules that she'd forgotten she was allowed to have her own thoughts. She didn't fight for me that night. She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms folded, eyes down, and said, "And I will never forget this as long as I live." She said, "You made your choice, Cassie. I was 18. My choice was wanting a job. But here's what I also need you to know. My grandmother, my father's mother, Grandma Ruth, she had passed away 4 months before that night. And before she died, she had looked me in the eye from her hospital bed and told me that she'd taken care of me, that I was going to be okay. She pressed my hand and said, "Don't let them shrink you, baby girl." I didn't know exactly what she meant at the time. I found out 3 days after she died, when my father sat Tyler and me down and told us Grandma Ruth had left her estate to be managed by the family. He said it so casually. So finally. Like it was already done. I was 17 then, almost 18, and I didn't know enough about probate law or wills or estates to know that what he'd just described was not how any of that was supposed to work. I didn't know he'd had the will redirected. I didn't know he'd spent the 4 months since her death, quietly, legally, or so he thought, restructuring what she left behind so that Tyler would be the primary beneficiary when he turned 21. I didn't know that my name, which Grandma Ruth had put in that document with her own hand, had been removed. I didn't know any of that at 18, standing in the rain. But I would. God, I would. Here's the thing about being thrown away by your family at 18. The first 6 months nearly break you. And I mean that in the most literal, non-dramatic way possible. I couch surfed. I picked up double shifts at that same diner my father had punished me for working at. I ate gas station food. I cried in bathroom stalls before clocking in so my customers wouldn't see it on my face. There were 2 weeks in February where I slept in my coworker Dana's car because her landlord wouldn't allow guests, and it was either that or a shelter with a 3-week wait list. I was 19 years old sleeping in a Honda Civic in February. And every single night, I thought about Tyler in my bedroom. Warm, fed, loved, celebrated, getting everything handed to him by two people who had decided, somewhere along the way, that one of their children deserved a future and the other one deserved a garbage bag. But here's what rock bottom quietly gives you if you're paying attention: clarity. I stopped crying somewhere around month 7. Not because I healed, not because I forgave, but because something cold and focused settled into my chest like concrete hardening. And I made myself a promise. I was going to figure out what my grandmother actually left me. And I was going to get every single dollar of it back. I enrolled in community college at 19, working nights, studied business and paralegal studies, not because I had some grand plan yet, but because I needed to understand how money and law worked, so nobody could ever manipulate me with my own ignorance again. At 22, I landed an entry-level position at a small real estate firm. I was sharp, I was hungry, and I worked like someone who had something to prove. Because I did. By 24, I had my real estate license. By 26, I had saved enough to bring on a probate attorney named Gerald Sims, a quiet, bespectacled man who wore the same brown cardigan 3 days a week and was, without any exaggeration, the most dangerous person my father had ever unknowingly made an enemy of. I handed Gerald everything I had. Grandma Ruth's obituary, her hospital records showing her mental clarity at the time of her death, a handwritten letter she'd sent me 2 weeks before she passed, in which she mentioned specifically that she had made sure the house and the accounts go to my Cassie, because she's the one who's going to do something real with it. That letter, that one letter she wrote in her careful, looping handwriting on yellow notepad paper, that was the thread Gerald pulled. What unraveled was worse than I'd imagined. My father hadn't just redirected the will. He had found a notary, a friend of a friend, to witness a codicil, a handwritten amendment, dated 2 weeks after Grandma Ruth's death, allegedly in her handwriting, allegedly signed by her, removing my name entirely and transferring the primary inheritance, her paid-off home valued at $340,000, and a savings account with $91,000, to Tyler, held in trust by my father until Tyler's 21st birthday. Ruth had been dead for 14 days when that document was supposedly signed. Gerald didn't even blink. He just took off his glasses, cleaned them slowly, and said, "Cassie, this is fraud." The next 18 months were the quietest, most focused period of my entire life. I told no one. I didn't call my mother. I didn't reach out to Tyler. I didn't post anything. I went to work. I met with Gerald, and I built the case brick by brick. Handwriting analysts, the notary who, when faced with a formal deposition, suddenly remembered very little about the circumstances of that signing. Bank records showing my father had been drawing a management fee from Grandma Ruth's savings account for the 2 years he'd been listed as her financial power of attorney before her death. It wasn't just the inheritance. He had been quietly draining her accounts for years. By the time Gerald filed the civil suit, we had documentation of over $140,000 in combined fraud and financial elder abuse. The house had already been transferred into Tyler's name, Tyler, who by then was 25, working a job my father had gotten him, living in Grandma Ruth's house like it was just his. like he'd earned it, like nothing had ever happened. And that brings me back to that dinner. My mother had called me the first time in 4 years to invite me to Tyler's birthday dinner. I almost didn't go. Gerald told me I didn't have to. But I thought about 18-year-old Cassie on that sidewalk in the rain, watching Tyler eat chips through the window. And I said yes. I walked in wearing that coat. I sat down at that table. I let my mother fuss over the centerpiece, and my father pour his wine, and Tyler laugh too loud at his own jokes. I let the whole performance play out, the normal family, the happy home, the revisionist history where none of them had ever done a single thing wrong. Then, between the main course and dessert, I reached into my bag. I placed 3 envelopes on the table. 1 in front of my father, 1 in front of my mother, 1 in front of Tyler. My father looked at his and said, "What is this?" I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, and said, "You've been served." The civil suit. The fraud documentation. The elder abuse filing Gerald had quietly coordinated with the county Dawes office, which, as of that morning, had opened a criminal investigation into my father. My mother started crying. Tyler pushed back from the table like the envelope might bite him. My father's face went a color I had never seen on a human being before. I stood up, put on my coat, and I said the only other words I said that entire evening, calm, quiet, final. She told me not to let you shrink me. I didn't. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. Gerald's case settled 14 months later. The house came back to me. The accounts with interest and damages came back to me. My father pled to a reduced charge to avoid prison time, but the conviction is public record and permanent. He lost his financial advisory license, the career he had built his entire identity around, within 60 days of the guilty plea. Tyler had to vacate Grandma Ruth's house with 30 days' notice. I renovated it. I rent it out now. Every month, when that deposit hits my account, I think about a girl in a wet hoodie on a November sidewalk. And I feel nothing for them. Not anger anymore, not sadness, just the quiet, clean satisfaction of a woman who was counted out and kept every single receipt